I have only told this story a few times, and when I do tell them, they just assume that I must be making it up or lying. But I'm swearing on my life, it did happen the way that I am about to tell you. It was July of 2019, and I had been in the charming little town of Fairview, Ohio, for a week of conference work. I'm an auditor, so my road life is a never-ending cycle of boring nights in hotel rooms, an endless reservoir of PowerPoint slides, and awful coffee. The visit was boring except for the teensy tiny little thing that makes my flesh crawl to this day, room 13. The hotel wasn't, however, first class. It was a red brick 3-story affair from the 70s, I'd estimate. I entered in the bloodshot-eyed young one behind the front desk, slapped the key card down on the counter in the quiet. I read the room number and halted. 13. I laughed nervously. Luck of the draw, isn't it? I said. He glanced up, considering in his mind when and whether he would respond, and slanted toward a feeble smile. Yeah, lucky. It was so laughingly ridiculous a response that I was ready to ask him why, but didn't want to sound crazy. I never gave myself a hassle about superstitious stuff myself, so took my bag and went on up. The second-floor hallway was dark. Thinly colored beige walls, faded maroon carpet, a perfume-scent dust, and something then that I could not easily define. My own footsteps echoed hollow in my own hearing as I crossed the hall to what I knew was the room far down at the end where room 13 would be. I approached the door and saw that something strange was their brass door number scratched, as if someone attempted to scratch it off. The metal on the edges is dented, and there is a smudge of black on the door handle area like soot. I went in and the smell hit me first. Not just what it was pungent metallic like rusty blood or rust. It was small, a queen-size bed, a desk, a closet, a single window with heavy drapes already drawn. The air is thick, almost syrupy, but there is an air conditioner, or at least it's pretending. I was trying to convince myself that all I needed was a break from the journey. I opened the shower and jumped onto the bed, surfing on my phone. That is where I saw something that made my stomach turn. The TV in standby mode flashed once. It was static, a one-time burst, but I saw it. Then in the darkness of the screen, I would have noticed something on the edge of the closet. I put my head around nothing. I chuckled to myself, recalling it was all pretend. My chest was constricting though. I pushed that out of my mind and flipped on the TV for background noise. I awoke that night at 2:47 a.m. I recall the time precisely because the red of the alarm clock burned on my eyeball. Something had disturbed me, but at first I did not notice. I remained in bed, bringing my ears perked up. I heard it said, soft scratch, scratch. It was near the back of the closet. I rolled over, racing heart thudding in my brain. The scratching had been faint, initially the muffled squeak of claws against wood, but sounded louder and more desperate. I looked at the closet door, held my breath. I tried to tell myself that it was a mouse or the building creaking, but the scratching was too deliberate, too human. I fell off the bed and crept toward the door. My hand trembled when I swung it open. The scratching stopped in mid-scratch. The quiet was awful. I stood there holding my breath and threw open the door. Nothing. The closet was empty except for the solitary coiled wire hanger that was hanging on the rod. My purse remained on the floor shut. I searched everywhere and anywhere, even on the ceiling like a total idiot, but there was nothing. I was frantic, shut the door, and I slept some more. But while I was sleeping, I could hear something besides what I was used to. Breathing. It wasn't mine. It was strained, stilted, and sitting on the edge of my bed. I just sat there, eyes open wide into darkness. My head was yelling at me to look to see, but there was some warning inside me not to move. The breathing was louder, closer, until I was convinced that I could feel the breeze licking against my legs. And then, like it had begun, it ended. I must have passed out with fright or fatigue, for the next thing I was aware of was that the room was flooded with sunlight. The curtains were open. I never leave them open. My case was open, clothes scattered on the floor. When I went down to breakfast, I teased the desk clerk and inquired if he had heard anything about room 13. His grin disappeared, and he leaned over the counter at me. You don't want to know, he said softly, but You may want the closet door shut at night." I giggled, unevenly assuming he was joking, but he wasn't smiling anymore. I'd had it the night before with room 13 weirdness. I was crazy, I maintained, but I closed the closet door and I blocked the handle with a chair, just in case. I awoke at 3 a.m. once more. It wasn't the breathing or the scratching that awakened me this time. It was the whispering. It was too quiet to listen initially. Only a low humming, the kind one has the radio on very quietly. But if I concentrated my eyes really hard, I could pick up the whispering again inside the closet. I sat up in bed, pounding hard, and listened. "Get out." I bristled. The man's voice was husky, phlegm-filled, as though the man had phlegm in his throat. "Get out now." The figure behind the handle groaned horribly. Once, twice, and then, with a scraping pull as though something was ripping the door wide open from within, I leapt out of bed and slid down the room's length to the opposite corner. The rattling ceased. The silence clung thick. And then, the closet door opened by itself. The chair slid on its own across the carpet, pushed by whatever. My breath was caught in my throat as something coalesced. It wasn't hard, it was human shape, but the features were mixing with the darkness like the fog. The head was contorted at a sickening angle to one side, and the face. The face was white and rotting with empty holes where the eyes had been. The monster rested against me, and for sure it was colder than ice. I was shaking. I was froze, couldn't move, couldn't yell. It was leaning over me, just inches from my mouth, and said one final thing. "You should have left." I have absolutely no idea how I managed to end up outside the room. The next thing I knew, I was in the hotel lobby, bare feet, and freezing to death the night clerk looking at me like I was insane. He did not even ask what was going on. He just handed me a new room, key room 21. The next morning I left early. When I checked out, the clerk at last told me what had happened. There was this crazy salesman, Daniel Price, who had booked room 13 15 years earlier. He slit his wrists after a week of carousing, police reported, after he barricaded himself within the closet. The maid discovered him 3 days later. They accused his body for stinking so much it seeped through the walls. The hotel renovated to modernize the fixtures and painted the walls with a reddish hue, but the guests persisted in complaint against scratching, mumbling, and odor of blood. The hotel tried renumbering rooms by leaving out 13, but for some strange reason the room just did not disappear with the number sign on the door. I've stayed in 100 hotels since, but I've never, and I mean never, stayed in room 13 again. And when I open an open closet, I can swear that I still hear the rasping whisper saying leave.